Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking about chapter 4 out here in the desert. So it's pretty hot out here, so we're going to get going because, yeah, you know how the desert is. When I lived in California, we used to go to the desert a lot. My son and I, and a buddy and his son. We only had 3 rules in the desert. That was kind of nice about it. We didn't shoot ourselves, we don't shoot each other, and we don't shoot our vehicle. Other than that, you do whatever you want to do. So anyhow, enough about that. Let's get the show on the road so I can get out of this hot desert sun. All right, chapter 4 is called Enforcing Fire Safety Compliance. Unfortunately, well, with every law, people don't want to do it, so somehow you have to enforce it. So that's what we're going to talk about, the various ways they're enforced, not just by the kind of like the fire cops, but we're going to describe the legal authority for code enforcement, the importance of plan review and its relation to code enforcement, identify how control of sales and use assists in fire code enforcement, and give some examples, recognize how structural control is used as a means of code enforcement, and give specific examples of structural control, identify how control of occupancy is used as a means of code enforcement, and give some examples about that too. Describe compliance and abatement procedures and why assurance of compliance is preferred over court action. List some fire safety considerations in specific types of occupancies. And remember, these videos here with me yakking at you, going through a PowerPoint of the chapter are only overviews. You really need to read the book because there's a lot more in the chapter that we can cover in this. This is just to give you an idea what's going on and give you some high points. This is, it says, Frederick County, Maryland, Fire Prevention Code, capacity certificate, no more than 90 persons permitted in this place, whatever that is. We'll talk about that a little later on. Publicity for fire codes. Media is often used ineffectively rather. The effective use will include press coverage for enactment of fire safety codes, give a clear idea of code coverage. In other words, get the people there, get it out there. Here's what we're doing. We have a new code and here's why, and here's what's going to do for you. Signage always helps. No smoking signs. You see them everywhere. Occupancy signs must be posted in a lot of places, particularly assembly places like restaurants and that type of thing. Plan review program for fire code enforcement. Plan review is pretty much what it says: review of plans for building, programs for review of plans and specifications. You need to have a qualified trained individual. They have to know what to do, how to read a plan or a blueprint, coordinated and carried out with the building department, rotated through the fire department as procedure, let different people look at them, established through municipal directives. So usually you have a directive there that these plans must be reviewed before you can proceed. Almost every municipality has that. Fire protection engineers. The ideal scenario for a plan reviewer is to have a fire protection engineer, but there's not that many of them around. So they're not always available. They can speak with authority among industry professionals. They're usually civilians and not part of the fire department. They're dressed in civilian clothes and they don't fight fires, but they're part of the fire department, but they're not the uniform fire department. Assist in long-range departmental planning also. They can, again, typically found in larger but not smaller departments because, frankly, these smaller fire departments can't afford them. Plan review program should include preliminary plan review. That's a plan review before the plan review. And the idea of this is the quicker you can solve a problem, the easier it is to get it fixed and to change it, and the less expensive it is. So that's why they like the architects and stuff. They like to have this because if there's a problem, you want to know it as soon as possible. So that's why architects more often provide plan review at this stage. They want it looked at earlier. Archiving of critical documents allows retrieval of information months or years later. Desire from a legal standpoint in case of future litigation. So the archive reduces storage space. CAD, what's CAD? Computer assisted design permits retention of plans by computer. They're really great. I worked for a while and I had at a company and I did all the quoting for them on the interior on the drapery manufacturing company, Drapery Bedspread. So I'd get the plans and they would come in a roll. I mean, there'd be this big around in a tube, and you have to lay them out and figure out what the things are and all the sizes and everything. And it was I never had training in it, but I figured it out, and that's what I used to quote on a lot of things, a lot of jobs. And they were a lot to store because these things, like I said, you get sometimes you get 3 or 4 of them. You only need one of them, but they send you the whole plans. And so computer assisted design permits retention of plans by computer. Back when I was first starting out, and I was a plant manager, and I probably started out in California when I got there in 1978. And first thing I would do would get the biggest piece of cardboard I could find, a box or something, and some graph paper, and put the graph paper over it and make a layout of the building. That just was really helpful in doing anything you wanted to do, any planning or anything like that, and fire extinguishers and everything. Well, of course, now later on, then I would do that with a cheap CAD program. Not TurboCAD. TurboCAD's expensive and very sophisticated, but there was I forget what it was called, but I had one that was like $60, and I used it a lot. It was pretty good. Plan review. Firefighters should be trained to read blueprints. It's just usually blueprints, you need a little bit of training in it. And also that provides some representation of fire service in the plan review process. And code backing, you need to know the codes because you need to designate the code for reference. Correlation, plan review, correlation with inspection. Only effective if it's followed up with inspection. So you can do all the plan review you want, but if nobody takes a look to make sure that plan is being followed, then what good is it? Because the requirements in plan aren't always carried out by the builder. Cannot always be readily detected in the field later on either. Remember what I've said many times about contractors. They're usually paid to get by the job, and they want to get it done quickly. The quicker they get it done, the more money they make. Sometimes they will take shortcuts. Cooperation between several agencies is essential. Building departments, for example, maybe some electrical. The insurance industry may have interest in plan review. Why do you think that would be? Pretty simple. Who's going to pay for something if it burns down? The insurance company, right? So insurance industry is a good partner for anybody that's involved in any kind of safety. That's just a picture of somebody, guys, reviewing plans. Control of sales and use as a means of fire code enforcement. Control of sales and use as a means of fire code enforcement. Think about that for a minute. Gasoline, hazardous materials, fire alarm systems, extinguishers, explosive, fireworks, they're all controlled. Their sale and use are controlled. And that's basically a means of fire code enforcement. Fire Prevention Bureau responsible for controlling, for example, explosives, gasoline, fireworks, fire extinguishers, control of gasoline sales, subject in most fire prevention codes. There's and how you handle it, store it, type of dispensers, type of containers you can use. That's all controlled. So you go buy go to Walmart and buy a 5-gallon gas can. It has certain specifications it has to meet. Control fire alarm systems. Public safety function too must be properly designed to function in an emergency. Some communities require fire alarms to be approved by the fire department. And that's a good idea too, because anybody could say they're a fire alarm, but how are you going to find out if it works or not? Chances are you're going to find out about that when you need it. So it's a good idea to have some overview on this type of thing. Control of explosives, control of handling, storage, and sales of explosives have long been covered in fire prevention codes. Identification of the purchaser and recording their name and address so you know who bought it. Controls the function of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. The only thing then the issue arises from that is because it's so controlled, somebody buys it legally, they have to be really careful because somebody that wants it illegally, they're going to try to steal it. So you have to make sure you have security measures from theft. In fireworks, certain individuals who set up public displays certify individuals who set off public displays. Not just anybody go out there and do it. They have to know what to do and have to be trained and certified. That's always a good idea. Structural control is a means of fire and building and code enforcement. Structural control is a means of enforcement effected through the plan review function coupled with the inspection before occupancy to be sure that all safety requirements have been fulfilled. Includes inspection of materials, appurtenances, and other factors related to the building, like fixed manufacturing equipment. That's usually equipment that's bolted to the floor. It's fixed. Interior finishes, what's on this wall or door or ceiling. Fixed fire protection systems, like sprinkler systems. Re-inspections, because just because you inspected it in June doesn't mean it's going to be the same way in July. And electrical equipment. Fault tree analysis, problem solving relationships, actions that lead to failure. This is pretty detailed. We're really not going to get into fault tree analysis. They mentioned it briefly in this chapter, but we're really not going to get into it on this. Smoking materials started 90,000 fires in 2010. That's smoking materials. Bulky waste materials are also a problem, just even not just oily rags that can actually can have spontaneous combustion, but just any kind of bulky waste thrown around somewhere. Trash is the problem. Fire safe cigarettes, Cigarette Safety Act of 1984, Fire Safe Cigarette Act of 1990, and NIST and ASTM have some standards on it for measuring the ignition strength of cigarettes. They made cigarettes that don't burn as freely, I should say, as they used to. And that's a good idea. Control of occupancy as a means of fire code enforcement. Control of occupancy is an enforcement method that controls occupancy load through determination of the adequacy of egress and through provision of fire safety personnel on scene to ensure an orderly evacuation in the event of a fire. Determining and posting occupancy capacity within structures. The occupancy capacity, use of fire watch if there's a problem, or train company employees. Capacity is usually determined by the square footage and the width of the doors, the egress in the building. Legal aspects of fire code enforcement. Ultimate goal is improvement of facility rather than imposition of punitive measures. So they really don't want to punish anybody or fines or court action. They just want people to get the job run right, improve the facility, make it safer. And that probably is a good idea, because the fire department are pretty well trusted individuals, because that's what they want to do. Do they have to resort sometimes to punitive measures? Yes, they do. But most of the time they don't, because most people realize what they're doing is for the good of your business, the public, or whatever. They can issue notice of violation, injunctions, and those are usually local issues. And there could be some potential liability there for anybody involved. And of course, there's potential liability every time you're involved in anything. Condemnation of unsafe structures. Most municipalities have the power granted permitting building officials to order demolition if the owner fails to take corrective action. There are steps they have to go through, notices, etc., and the local statutes for the authority, and then demolition, or maybe even the repair. And when they usually do that, if they have to demolish a structure, they'll put a lien on that piece of property so that anybody that buys it is going to have to pay the city back for whatever they paid for. Fire prevention, and life safety measures often come about as a result of tragedy. This is all about in special occupancies, like nursing homes, boarding homes for the elderly, and high-rise structures. Why did this happen? Well, because a lot of times buildings a while back that were schools maybe get closed down, and they turned them into nursing homes with nothing done about fire prevention or anything. And so that's what I'm on there. Okay. Now, incapable of self-preservation, a condition associated, for example, with reduced cognitive ability, inability to ambulate independently, and ambulate just a fancy word for walk, and medical treatment that makes a person unable to take appropriate actions when faced with life-threatening hazards. You saw that man in a chair in the video. I think it was last module of the room caught on fire in a security video, and that gentleman is sitting there, and he's obviously up in years, and he just doesn't have a clue of the danger that he's in a room that's on fire. And in fact, he gets up and he walks towards it like he's gonna do something, and without, I don't know what, but he didn't have anything to do anything with. But that's give you an idea what happens with people when they get up in years. Residential sprinklers. Some places are making it mandatory. It's been a torturous process because they cost money. But these communities in California, Georgia, Maryland, and Arizona have made some inroads into making code development process requiring residential sprinklers. Now, there has been some incentive in economic incentive in residential sprinklers, because there's some cost savings because you'd be able to use less fire rated equipment, like 1 hour fire rated walls instead of 2 hours, for example, and that can be a considerable cost saving throughout the house if you install a sprinkler system. So it's been some cases and where residential sprinklers can actually save money on the construction costs. The Florida Fire Chief Association got legislation requiring retroactively sprinklers in certain existing hotels and motels. Not too many times do you see anything that's required retroactively. That means what, after the fact. But they did this because the economic incentive was tourism. This is Florida. Florida has this big on tourism. So they got these older hotels and stuff to put sprinklers in because they didn't want to have a big fire and kill a lot of people. That would be bad for tourism. So they had an economic incentive there. I remember in California, we did a job at one of the old missions in Riverside, California. The Mission Inn, it was called. Big old building, beautiful, all odd sizes and stuff. And they had earthquake. I think it had some earthquake damage. So they had to retrofit it, and they had to retrofit it for both earthquake and fire. And it was a big, big, big job. It was a lot of work. It was a bit of a beautiful old building. Summary: plan review is a way of controlling, of enforcing the fire codes. Methods of control could be the sale of for instance, gasoline, explosives, etc. And then there's a lot of legal aspects of control of hazardous and fire safety issues, hazardous materials and fire safety issues. So read the chapter. That's where we're going to get most of your information off of this. This is just a summary. So that's it for now, and we'll catch you guys later.